exposing the secret sauce in business-to-business marketing. The TAGLine Podcast is where real stories meet proven strategies. Let's elevate your business. Real strategies, real stories, real results. In the business-to-business industry, you're not selling to businesses. It's human to human. We break down what works, what doesn't, and how you can truly stand out. Transparency, credibility, growth. Get a behind-the-scenes look at what drives success in business-to-business marketing. Get ready for the next TAGLine Podcast powered by the Abley Group.
Welcome to the TAGLine Podcast powered by the Abley Group, where we dig into the strategies, systems, and stories behind business growth. Today, I'm excited to be joined by someone who truly understands the power of consistency and connection in marketing, Nic Conley. He's the creator of The Follow-Up, a fast-growing newsletter that's redefining how professionals stay top of mind and build trust over time. Nic has built a reputation for delivering sharp, tactical insights that help business leaders turn their follow-up game into real growth engine. Whether you're in sales, marketing, or leadership, you know how critical it is to stay engaged. But few are doing it right, and that's where Nic comes in. Nic, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you for for that awesome intro. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, me too, man. This is pretty cool. I've been a subscriber to your newsletter, which is how we got engaged. I don't remember exactly what you put out there going back a few months, but it certainly prompted insight for me in terms of wanting to hear more about your story. So I really appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited to chat about it today, and yeah, how others can learn from it as well.
Cool. Well, man, let's jump right in then. You've got a really awesome newsletter that comes out a couple times a week, and you're always putting in such great information. What made you, first of all, want to start a newsletter? What was like the impetus behind all that?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words there. Essentially, I have been obsessed with newsletters for like the past 4 years or so. So I initially started learning about newsletters, I think by listening to My First Million and then just being hyper online on Twitter. But basically, Sam Parr that started the hustle and then sold it to HubSpot for what a lot of people guess is around like $27 to $30 million. That initially got me interested of like, oh, wow, these newsletter businesses are they could be extremely profitable, and like there's a clear system of how to basically grow them, sell ads, generate revenue, and then there's buyers in that space as well. So I got pretty obsessed with newsletters about 4 years ago, and I was working at Amazon. I knew I was going to leave soon, and I was looking for, what I was going to do next. And so I came up with the idea for the follow-up. Basically, the follow-up is a newsletter all for B2B salespeople, covering like tactics, the latest news, and basically what B2B salespeople want to know to be better at their job, but also just like stay informed in what's going on in the B2B sales industry. And I basically found that there was a hole in the market. There was lots of marketing newsletters, lots of finance newsletters, general business newsletters, but there wasn't really anybody talking about sales. And we can get into this later of why I think that was and still sort of is. But I saw a hole in the market. I had been studying newsletters and how they were built, and so I finally decided to just take the leap. And that's how I started the follow-up. And then I left Amazon about 6 months after I started it and started working on it more consistently or full-time, essentially.
I guess I got to ask, what was your role at Amazon? Were you on the frontline sales, like where you were looking for this type of information and it didn't exist? Or were you just absolutely crushing it for them, selling all kinds of stuff? And you're like, you know what, other people might benefit from this as well?
Totally. So I was actually on their global e-commerce side. So basically when you go on Amazon.com and if you buy anything, most of the time you're not buying it directly from Amazon, you're buying it from a third-party seller. And so I worked with those third-party sellers to try to actually get them to go to Mexico, which is like extremely random, right? But there's a million and one different jobs at Amazon. So I was essentially selling them on trying to expand to Mexico or other parts of LATAM. So to be completely honest, it wasn't directly related. I've been in sales for my whole career as up to now. So different BDR jobs, AE jobs, account manager jobs, and then most recently, like an account manager sort of role at Amazon. So I've just been in the B2B sales world, right? Like my first job, it was just like everyone else's in sales, where you join and it's 80, 100 calls every single day, 100 cold emails, just trying to get meetings with B2B HR decision makers at the time was my role. So yeah, I hadn't really seen anyone doing it great. As opposed to like, you had Morning Brew and The Hustle and all these other ones that were kicking off for general business. And you also had marketing ones. I just didn't see anything out there for sales directly. So it's like, okay, I think that's an opportunity in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's blown up too, right? I mean, you've exploded your subscriber amount. Like you're doing, talk a little bit about the business today.
Yeah, sure. So we're at just under 21,000 subscribers. So it's a niche newsletter for sure, right? Like it's not like a Morning Brew or like The Hustle, where it's like, hey, anybody that's in business, works for a business, or like generally interested in business is like a good subscriber for this. It's going to be people that are mainly like sales reps, sales managers, and a lot of the time working in B2B sales, which would be software, manufacturing, really anything that a rep that sells to another business. So it is more niche, but yeah, we've grown to 21,000 subscribers. And just a few months ago, I also joined the HubSpot Creator Network. So basically the follow-up is a part of the HubSpot Creator Network, which means basically they're one of my biggest advertisers, and I promote and they promote my newsletter in other newsletters. So it's a network of basically organic growth that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. So talk a little bit about what inspired the follow-up. You're talking about business to business. You have to come up with a catchy name, something that folks are, like you said, the Morning Brew or, The Hustle. You've got, a reason for folks to click on that and say, oh man, what's this?
Yeah. Coming up with the name. I mean, I think everyone in sales knows that like following up is the most important thing you can possibly do in sales, right? It's like, that's how deals are won. It's not with like the initial outreach. It's all about the follow up. So originally I was just looking for names like, I went through a list and I started it with a partner, actually. We broke off a couple months in. He just wasn't as into it as I was. But we were bouncing every name you could imagine off each other, like, the sales warrior, the sales ninja. And it was like, this is all like a little bit cringy. And I wanted something, this is like probably a terrible way to look at things, but I was like, oh, it's The Hustle. Like, if I were to, I wanted something that was catchy and also like was the something. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's just like the follow up, and then there was no trademark on the follow up at the time, and now there is, and I'm the owner of it. But yeah, it was like, okay, well, nobody's using that quite yet. The follow up boss, which was like a big platform for like real estate investors, that was the closest thing to it that I could find. I said, okay, nobody's doing this yet, and I guess we kind of just fell in love with the name, the follow up.
Yeah. I love it too. I mean, it was instant, you knew exactly what it's about. And I mean, not to educate our listeners on or watchers on what follow-up is, but you mentioned, of course, it is the most important part of the sales process. Often, there's a whole host of statistics out there. It's somewhere between 14 and 27 times you've got to touch base with a prospect before they actually become a client. It's, somewhat dependent on industry, but, talk a little bit about, how you create content or derive content to fill this, great newsletter every week.
Totally. So, coming up with content, I'm not going to lie, it's not the easiest thing ever, right? Because when you think of, marketing content, or you think of finance content or general business content, there's a 24-hour news cycle where when it's marketing, it's like, oh, Meta just suspended ads here, or like there's a new TikTok growth channel. Like there's a constant news cycle of where you can talk about stuff in marketing or new attribution methods or things like that. Same goes for finance, right? Like the stock market is like the greatest like news 24/7 cycle ever, right? Like you could talk about one day how Amazon went up and how the next day it went down, and the reasons behind that. So there's just constant content to be made there. Sales, it's a little different, right? Because nobody talks about B2B sales, and it is kind of like behind the scenes, right? Like if a big rep from let's say like a news brand comes out, right, and they were able to like blow up their brand from TikTok. Everybody knows about that because they can see it happening. The founders are probably talking about it on Twitter or LinkedIn, and that's a great story. But when, a sales rep from Oracle closes a, $40 million deal, nobody hears about that. That's not like content that gets like put out in a PR statement. There's no story there. So coming up with content has been probably like the biggest struggle, but it's, I think, what sets us apart. So one, if there's any news stories that we can talk about, I love covering those because those are always timely and they do really well. So for instance, when there was a video of like a Cloudflare account executive getting fired last year, she recorded the whole time that she was getting let go. That went mega viral. That was like a huge moment, right? And we were able to write about that. But those stories probably only come around once every 2 to 3 months. So when we started out, we were looking for like we were trying to tell a lot more stories, and I still love telling stories. But based off some research, basically what HubSpot has told me before is that sales reps or salespeople really like tactical breakdowns, right? So this is going to be like your 5 out of the box outreach strategies that you can start using today, or like 7 different ways to like follow up without just following up in an email. So right. Very tactical things is what we try to cover mostly. And I also think that content can be broken down from an original topic a lot, right? So you can talk about cold calling in 60 different ways, or you could talk about cold emailing in 100 different ways, right? You could talk about following up in a lot of different ways as well, or outreach, right? So like for instance, outreach, you could talk about 10 different cold email templates that are working right now, or that work around the holidays. But then you could also talk about like 7 different personalized gifts that you can send people. So really trying to like dig down on specific topics and get super tactical, so that if someone spends the time reading it, which is, an honor that they do, then they walk away with like, okay, I should try using this on my next sales call, or like, I wasn't even thinking about this. I should try out this new method is sort of how I think about it.
So does it lend itself to actually be more plannable? So where like the other newsletters that you've talked about, like Stacked Marketer is another one, where they're more reliant on what's in the news yesterday versus, or what's coming versus, often you can, like you just said, you break those things, the tactical elements down, and make it not easier to do that, but then fill it in with like those stories or the opportunities for viral moments.
Yeah. So our content is definitely way more evergreen, which is like incredible because it could be written whenever. Now, like I'm such a procrastinator that like usually the newsletters get written like, the night before that they go out. So like absolutely that factor is pretty awesome. I'm just like thinking about like, even just looking at the titles of our last couple newsletters, like, yeah, most of these could be written at the, a month before. I think what I've really found is like anybody that has to create content or come up with ideas is like, you can't sit at a computer and be like, I'm going to come up with 10 content ideas, right? It's extremely difficult. It kind of just happens, right? So like I'm looking here, like, Alex Hormozy's 3 A's sales framework, right? Like one morning I woke up and I'm scrolling through my emails and it's like a Mosey minute email from Alex Hormozy where he's talking about this framework that he's used. And then I go down the rabbit hole of like finding all that stuff. I'm like, oh, that's a content idea. But like, I wasn't going to sit at my computer and just start like Googling good content ideas for sales. They kind of just come over time, and you have to keep like a running tab. And like anytime you're like light bulb moment, that's a good content idea. You got to have a running tab of those for sure.
Oh yeah, I bet. You've got to apply it to a host of different industries or potentially, right? I mean, when you're thinking about business to business, you want people to continue to open, scroll, and read through it, the whole thing, and then use those testimonials that come back and say, "Hey, this was a fantastic tip. Thank you so much."
Totally. I think one of the like most powerful tips for writing content is, especially in newsletters, is always having an audience of one, right? So you should envision like who your audience of one is, even if it's a million different people, right? So the Morning Brew says like when they started the Morning Brew, their audience of one was like, I forgot the name they used, but call it like Brian. He's a 28-year-old living in New York City. He has like a pretty good finance job. He wears like Lululemon and like goes out on the weekends. And he just wants to be able to open up Morning Brew, and it talks to him, right? So when they're writing it, they're writing to an audience of one. Now you have people of all different age ranges and, professions reading the Morning Brew these days. But I think starting with that audience of one. So for the follow-up, it was somewhat similar of like, okay, I'm writing for like, call it Brian, and he's either like an SDR or an AE, like a newer AE at a software company. And like, he just wants to get better at sales. He wants his commission checks to go up. And when that happens, that content could also be relevant to real estate agents or sales managers or anyone else. But like trying to write for that audience of one can, I think, make the content better, but also make it a little easier on you when you're writing it.
Yeah. You often talk about, businesses also need to have newsletters, and they need to, be able to articulate what makes them better, unique, different to their audience, because their audience is made up of existing clients, past customers, and potential prospects, as well as their own audience, right? Their employees and leadership who are trying to manage the business, and then the other companies that they want to do business with. Why is it so important for the companies to also have their own newsletter?
Yeah, I think companies that don't have their own newsletter, and even the ones that they do, it's still one of the biggest missed opportunities in marketing right now. And the reason is because like when you're showing up in someone's inbox once a week or twice a week or even once a month, like you're staying top of mind, right? Like nobody thinks of companies randomly. You're reminded of companies, and that's why like brand marketing is so massive, right? Like every time you see a Coca-Cola commercial, like they're not expecting you to click on that and go buy Coca-Cola right now. It's just like mind share takes a lot of time. And so if you have a customer list, there's no reason why you shouldn't be emailing them and trying to add value. Now, the reason I say even ones that do have a newsletter, what I see with a lot of companies is they want to send a newsletter that's just like, hey, here's the updates to our products. Now, like, click to book a demo, or like, here's 10% off, buy right now. I think there's like so much opportunity for these companies to treat themselves more like media businesses with their newsletter. So, like, for instance, I was thinking about this with like let's say a dentist office just has an email list of all of their past customers, or anyone that's even filled out like an intake form on their website. That's a extremely valuable list, one. And two, like, and the reason I say that as well is because like nobody's like itching to go like book their next dental appointment, right? But if they're showing up in like your inbox every week, like that's probably going to bump someone to be like, oh yeah, I do need to like book an appointment. Like I'm overdue. I should probably do it, right? So like you're getting that top of mind. But then you can also build like actually good content that people want to open up, right? So like, let's say you're a dental office in St. Louis, right? In your email, you don't have to be like, hey, we're open this week, like come book an appointment. You could say, hey, here's like 10 events going on in St. Louis that like we think are awesome. Here's like a highlight of one of our patients that's like a local business owner. Here's some updates to the office, and like here's a promo we're running as well, right? So like, yeah, sell in there, but also like provide value and entertainment to people so they actually want to open it and like, become fans of the office, which I know like sounds kind of cringe, but it's like, I think you can actually add value in these in these newsletters, and most companies aren't doing that.
Talk about how you'd be able to do that, say, as a, med tech manufacturing company. And, often you have 18-month runway until your next product iteration. And you just became, not to get super specific, but, thinking about several of them are on the low end of being publicly traded now. And, they've gone through that, and they're reluctant to put information out because it could impact any number of things. But, why should they still consider something like this?
Totally. I think just like always keeping that relationship open with your customers, like it's just like staying top of mind, right? It's following up. It's like just checking in, right? Like there's so many times where sales reps could probably get a sale or like, pick up like the conversation again if they just followed up or like said like, hey, like just checking in, or like, hey, here's some new information that I can present to you. So like that's essentially what I'm pitching as the reason you'd want a newsletter, right? Like it's all about staying top of mind. And if we talk about like actual content, I could probably have like a whole brainstorming session on what they could include. But like that's like an easy way to like make your CEO essentially like a thought leader, right? Like, hey, here's some news that happened in the space. Like, here's our CEO's comments on what he thinks, what he thinks of it and what he thinks it means for our industry, or like anything you can share about the company, or like, pictures of like a company outing, really anything that like makes the recipients of those emails feel like more connected with that company and stay top of mind. You never know when you're like going to send that out and then just get replies saying like, oh, like this just reminded me, we need to talk about this, or we're actually interested in learning more about this. I saw this early on in my career when I worked for a company called Drone Genuity, and we did drone projects for basically, if you go on Google right now and say like drone pilot near me, Drone Genuity would show up very high in those results. You go there, you click and say like, hey, I have a project here that I need help with. We then have like a whole database of pilots, and we'd source it out to those. We had an email list of tens of thousands, and once a month we'd send out an email just saying, hey, here's like 5 of the recent projects that we did, and like maybe 1 blog post. Every single time without fail that newsletter went out, we'd get like 10 to 20 inbounds of, hey, I forgot I have a project that I need done. Like, can you give me pricing on this? Like without fail, because they just forgot about us, right? And they forgot about that project they needed done, and that was the bump they needed.
I find, as well, that having another point of contact other than the sales rep too often bumps up the opportunity to call that sales rep, right? Or, to your point, include some information that maybe previously wasn't shared. I always talk to our clients about, you show me a great salesperson, often I'll show you pretty bad marketing, because, that salesperson's got to overcome reputation, or they've got to overcome the lack of information that's on the website, or their collateral's outdated. And they said, hey, don't worry about the pictures. Just because they're from the early 90s doesn't mean that we're not, bleeding edge and at the edge of technology, right? So I always find that helping the customers substantiate their marketing efforts and do that in a way where there's additional outreach is huge for the sales rep base.
Yep. No, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. So thinking about that, talk a little bit about the sales reps and their experience. You work so hard to provide tactical insights and how-tos. What are some of those things that have really stuck out through the course of this journey for you?
In terms of like what separates top sales reps, or
separates top sales reps, and then what makes them special.
So this is going to be like an answer that nobody likes to hear, but like time and time again, like so much of it comes back to the product that you sell, right? Like you put a mediocre sales rep at OpenAI right now, and they're going to look like a genius that sells millions of dollars a year, right? But you put that same sales rep at a newspaper company, and they sell, $70,000 worth of ads that year. And it's like, yeah, they're not that great. So much of it comes back to company. And that's why I think like early on, like even with me, when I first got out of college, I could not land a sales job. I probably had like 20 to 30 different interviews. Now, mind you, if I went back, like, yeah, I know why I didn't get those. I didn't really know what I was interviewing for. I didn't know, like, I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any skills. I didn't even know if I really wanted to go into sales. So I know why I didn't get those jobs. But I think most importantly, it's just like, get that first job so you have experience, you understand the role, and then it actually matters a lot what companies and products you go sell, because like that's going to determine how you want to sell something that people are like pulling instead of pushing away, right? So like an OpenAI or a lot of these AI companies where it's like people are just handing money to you because it's like, we need these things. Yeah. That's where like mediocre sales reps can, one, look like geniuses, and like two, make an absolute killing. I think another thing is just finding organizations that have these sales machines. So I was extremely lucky. My first sales job was at a company called salary.com. And I would not put them in like the industry pioneers list at all, but they did have like a really good training program. Which like for the first 2 weeks, I'm just going through like this training program, mock calls, this entire program that they had built out. And it was incredible for my career because like the next company that I went to, like maybe 2 days of training because it was a startup. And then you're just like on the phones. So like if I didn't have that first experience of like going through a formal training program, then, my career probably would have looked a lot different. So I think starting out a good training program at a good company, but also like the product that you sell. I know that's like kind of a cop-out answer. Then I think it just comes down to like really just wanting it, right? Like all of these like tactics are great. And if you can always have that 1% edge, I think that's great. But like no sales rep is incredible because like their, email copy is just like 2% better than the other ones. It's because like they're trying harder, they're building relationships better, they're following up more, and they just have like more drive. And sometimes they're just dealt a better territory. That also happens as well.
Yeah. Right. I mean, hey, that absolutely happens. You're in New Mexico, it's not a hotbed versus, Metro New Jersey or something. But there's a lot more opportunity. But that said, you make another good point about, consistency and frequency. How often or how much does that play into, following up and really what are some of the rules to follow in order to have great follow-up?
Yeah. I mean, what it really comes down to is just like never giving up. And then always trying to show up and give value. Right. And I know like the term value gets thrown around so much. You're just like, just provide value, just provide value. It's like, yeah, but what does that really mean? But I think it's just reaching out with a purpose. Right. So it's not reaching out just like, hey, bumping this or following up, which by the way, I think are actually totally fine depending on the scenario. So if you're like deep into a deal and you just sent over the contract to be signed and it's been like a day since you've heard back, I think it's totally fine just to say like, hey, just bumping this, any update? Because like you're already deep into it. But when you send someone a cold email and then they don't respond and you say like, following up on this or bumping this, like that stuff just pisses people off because it's like, you don't deserve my response. I've never told you once that I'm interested. Why do you think saying like bumping this or following up on this is going to get a response from me? So it's following up with either new information or like showing that you've done work, right? I think the principle of reciprocity works a lot. So like if you can, when you get cold emails, if you can tell someone actually did their research and like put in time to reaching out to you, I think the feeling of reciprocity stands a lot where it's like, oh, this isn't like some templated AI email. They put in the work to follow up with me and actually like look into what I'm doing. Like if I say, hey, I saw your work anniversary was 2 days ago. Congrats on this. I'm reaching out because I really think I can help you with this. Something along those lines, or like hey, I thought you'd be interested in this. Finding ways to just follow up with a purpose and value as well is like the real key to following up, and then staying consistent at it. Ryan Serhan's one of my favorite examples of, he sells, $1 million homes, and
Right.
he'll follow up with someone for 8 to 10 years in some cases before they buy. And it's worth it, because at the end of the day, he can get like a $5 million paycheck for closing that deal. But most people would have forgotten about that person 3 months into it when they said, hey, now's not the time.
Yeah, I mean, so funny. I was going to go in a different direction, but then you bring up Ryan, and I appreciate that, because what he just put out was something where he's been following up with somebody for 8 years and sold a huge apartment in the city, recently, and that was the thing. And I always say, so that's a big deal. So there's, in a lot of people's minds, it's worth it to continue to follow up because the potential payout is so large, versus somebody else, which, might have a lot smaller project. But the funny thing to me has always been that regardless of the deal size, often it still takes just as much follow-up to get it. So in my opinion, I'm always like, well, back to your piece about working for a great company or selling a great product, is like, I'd much rather sell something that's at the top end of the market and be, the most expensive, because it's going to take the same amount of work as that middle of the road, lower quality, piece, or cheapest one, versus, something that's really actually going to enhance somebody's well-being. And so, that's my opinion. And that's sort of what we try to make sure we do is, not just deliver value, but also provide value once they do become customers and clients.
Yeah. It's that meme where it's like the $500 client, right? And versus like the $50,000 client. The $50,000 client always is like, hey, just sent the wire. Like, thanks, looking forward to it. The $500 client is always like, hey, like, can I get a 10% discount on this? Like, I don't think it's working. Can we meet weekly? Like, can you send me updates on this? It's like, that always happens. And I was just talking to someone before this. I help a few newsletters with their ad sales, and the ad sales deals that close for $30,000 to $50,000 take the same amount of work as the ones that close for $2,000. Except a lot of the times the $2,000 ones actually take more time because they want to jump on a call and like fight you on pricing. Yeah. And yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, but I also believe that, that's where a good nurture campaign comes in as well, because not that you set it and forget it, you really do have to provide value. And what I was going to ask you before you mentioned, larger deal sizes is, where do you see the difference between cold outreach and then, you met somebody at a show and there was just, hey, we don't have something today, but we might have something in 6 months or, in a year.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by where do I see the difference? Like in how you follow up with them?
Yeah, in how you touch base, or somebody that maybe wasn't a strong opt-in. They were more of a prospect or client adjacent, and you reach out because it's maybe a lookalike list, and you've got an outbound cold campaign versus a high top of funnel, just kicking the tires, sort of, wanting to know more information.
Totally. I think you have to, I think it's always good to start with like your dream list of clients, right? So like your top 50 or 52 is how I did it in one of my jobs, where, we had like a deck of cards and it was like, here's your top 52. And you basically do whatever you have to try to get in front of them, whether that means like following up with them for 6 months with no reply until you finally get something. Now, you also don't want to piss people off, following up like once a day until like they just have to respond and say like, do not contact me anymore. Even then, sometimes, I've heard stories of turning those around. But yeah, I think like the first sign of life or the first sign of interest is where like that person then becomes a lead, right? Like if you send a cold email and they say like, hey, interested in learning more, like send over more information, you send it, they don't respond, you follow up, they don't respond. I tend to err on the side of like, hey, they showed interest at one point. So, we can keep following up until they give us an answer of yes or no, because sometimes they just want to be like pushed a little bit more to like actually book the call. They're like, yeah, I'm interested, but if they keep following up, then I'll maybe book the call, but I'm not going to put any effort towards it. Someone that like you just loosely met, that person, like, basically like a drip campaign is like what you said. I think you kind of do that as a sales rep with just like, hey, checking in, like, how are things? Saw you guys raise the Series B. Saw this article the other day. Thought you might find it interesting. I really like the idea of following up with no ask. So being like, hey, saw you guys like raise the Series B. Like, congrats on that. That's so awesome. And then no ask at the end. Be like, hey, but now are you like free for a 5-minute call next week? I think just like delivering value with no ask like builds up so much goodwill with them that when, the time does come in a year or 6 months, like you're the first call that they make, or, you're the first email that they send, like, hey, now's the time we need to start looking, like, let's talk. But it's all about staying top of mind there.
So let's change gears just slightly and talk about some of the horror stories that you've found yourself in so far. Like, as you go through building this newsletter, what are some things that you are absolutely committed to that just didn't pan out?
Let's see here. That's tough to say. I don't know. Like, is there any like areas of it? So like the business model is somewhat simple at this point, right? So it's, you build a big list, you deliver as much valuable content as you can, and then you work with sponsors to sponsor the content so they can get their ads in front of a bigger audience, and both sides win. You get paid. So I think I always hope that it would grow a lot quicker. That's just the growing pains of building a big newsletter. I'm in the newsletter industry, and I think I've been able to see like a lot of people do it the right way and a lot of people do it the wrong way. There's all sorts of shady tactics out there of just like scraping lists and then putting them on a newsletter. I was talking about that with someone earlier today, and that's just like a one-way ticket to like a terrible newsletter that has no value in it, because people aren't signing up to your newsletter for that reason. They're signing up. They're not signing up at all. They're just getting put on a list. There's also other things that, like, I believe lead magnets can be kind of tough for engagement as well. They can get a lot of people to sign up. So let's say, I run an ad or put out a lead magnet that says, download, do you want access to this like 30-point cheat sheet for sales calls? Give me your email right here and we'll subscribe you to the newsletter. Sometimes that can actually hurt engagement, because like they didn't actually want to sign up to the newsletter. They just wanted to get that cheat sheet, and they weren't interested in actually reading your newsletter every week. So yeah, there's like a lot of things.
Do you put the lead magnets in the newsletter so that you can, is that some like a sell spot for maybe a sponsor, and then they're able to do that, or is that something that you use as added value, and now you kind of segment that list and say, oh man, they're a lot more engaged, maybe there's something more here?
Yeah, so like I've been able to see behind the scenes of a lot of newsletters. So like I've never really gone the route of trying to do a ton of lead magnets to get people to sign up. Where I have used lead magnets is for referrals. So like I'll have a referral program that says, hey, do you want like our 8 follow-up email templates? Refer 1 or 2 people to the newsletter, and then I'll send you over this cheat sheet. That tends to work really well. Morning Brew basically built like 30% of their list early on through referral programs, but they were doing it with like sweatpants or t-shirts or sweatshirts, which then you add in an entire other element of like 1, hard costs, and 2, logistics, right? Because then you have to send all of these people that referred people actual physical goods. So you have the cost of that physical good, and then the logistics of like collecting their address and going through that whole process. So that's where like digital products, or not digital products, but lead magnets work really well, because it's like, hey, if you refer 1 person to this, I'll give you this whole cheat sheet that costs me nothing to send after, I've already built it, and you get a lot of value there for just referring 1 person to the newsletter.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally understandable. And what are some of the things that actually on the other side worked out exponentially better than you were expecting?
Let's see. So if someone wants to build a newsletter that lives off of like marketing or sponsors or advertising, so essentially building up a big list that sponsors want to buy ad spots in. One, I think you need to go pretty niche. So like mine is sales. Going extremely broad or consumer is very tough because one, the rates are going to be lower, and two, like the buyers aren't exactly super obvious, right? Like it's not like, hey, HubSpot wants to advertise in this to reach this audience of unknown, mixed group of people. So I think like going B2B was something that was like, it was strategic, but yeah, sticking in the B2B world, the rates are just higher. Let's see. I think a lot of it just comes to like sticking with it and consistency. So like the first 6 months or year, like you think that like you're going to blow up and then everyone's going to want to advertise in your newsletter. There's a lot of crickets early on, right? Like it takes just showing up constantly and like building over time and like proving concepts, and then good things tend to happen, when you can compound everything. So like anyone that says like, hey, I'm going to start a newsletter, I'm going to run some paid ads to get some subscribers, and then 6 months, I'm just going to like start, getting checks sent to me because all these advertisers want to advertise in it. Like, good luck. Like it's probably going to take a year plus or 2 years, unless someone already has a massive social media following. But it's probably going to take a lot longer than you think to start getting real advertisers, start getting like real readership, and see all the compound effects of that. So yeah, I would say like just sticking with it is like the biggest thing. And yeah, showing up every single week.
What's funny is my daughter left today to go on a school trip. So she's headed to Ecuador and then the Galapagos Islands for a trip. And I told her, I said, one of the things that is going to make the difference between, the itinerary that you have from the chaperones and you have all these places that you're absolutely going to go to is the in between. It is, showing up and saying yes to the adventure. And I said, it translates into life too. Showing up is a superpower. When life gets you down, no one expects you to be there. So when you do, show up, it's, it means more. And then when life is great, no one expects you to show up because you don't need to be there anymore. So continuing to be, present and, putting the time, effort, energy, and sometimes investment in when, the odds are stacked against you, is a superpower in life. And I think that's, with any business, you're not going to just put it online and say, hey, we're open, and you get hordes of people coming in. I mean, here we're celebrating 11 years at the Ably Group here in August. And, every day I'm still introducing ourselves for the first time to folks. By no means are we huge, but at the same token, there are a couple industries that we're well known in, or I think we're well known in, and you're still introducing yourself saying, hi, I'm Justin Starbird, and I think we can help you. That is a really important to learn in business, and even more important as you continue to share with sales folks and the B2B industry and your readers that that truly is a superpower.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's half the battle, right? I started building this newsletter around a time when I know a lot of people that were kicking off newsletters around that time, and they're no longer writing that newsletter, or maybe some of them are inconsistently. They just like haven't grown because like you actually have to like show up and stay consistent and like continue to try to do better every time, right? Like it's not just like, oh, I put something out and like, it'll keep growing. It's like you have to be proud of what you put out as well, right? And actually give it your all every time. So yeah, I 100% agree. It's all about staying consistent and showing up your best.
Yeah. All right, man. So tell me what's next. What do you have? Here we are, the end of June, 2025. The world's going crazy right now, but you're in a pretty good spot. How, what's next for you?
Yeah, I think as for the follow-up, we're just trying to continue growth, right? This newsletter, we're at 21,000 right now. I think we can accelerate growth a bit. I think things compound as well as you get bigger. So it's really just trying to get to a bigger audience, deliver more value for our subscribers, and hopefully work with some more advertisers as well. I think that, as you get bigger, the reality of it is if you have a small list, maybe it's a super engaged one, but some of these bigger companies, it's just not worth their time to spend money on ads in it if they're only going to reach 5,000 people. They have more than that on like their unsubscribe list, right? So it's just getting to a size where like more companies start taking you seriously, and some of these B2B companies start seeing you as like, hey, this is like, we have to be spending there, right? Like we need to be reaching that audience. So just more of the same and going harder, I would say.
Yeah. All right. So here's your plug, man. For advertisers first, what do they get when they, get the access to be part of your newsletter, and reach the 21,000, folks that are on it? What can they expect? Is it a length of time that they're there? Do they build it with you? What are your packages?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's all sorts of packages, anywhere from, doing 1 week, which includes a Tuesday and Thursday edition, all the way up to, like the deal I have with HubSpot, where it's a year-long partnership. So we can get super customizable or custom depending on what you're looking for. Whether it comes to like creating content together and things like that, we're super open. We're super scrappy on ways that we can best work together. So yeah, anywhere from like test budgets of just trying to reach the audience a couple times, or, long-term partnerships where we can work out deals that, help both of us grow. So yeah, reach out to me if you're interested.
Great. And then for subscribers, for folks that, are your perfect, audience, talk about what they expect out of the Tuesday and Thursday newsletter.
Totally. So if you are a sales rep or someone that's interested in just getting better at sales, right? So maybe you're a business owner, or you're just someone that's interested in like, hey, I know sales is important, whether it's, selling actual products, or like selling myself to, a new job, or a new business owner, or really anyone in life. Go to jointhefollowup.com. You can subscribe there. We'll send you every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll break down one piece basically of tactical information of what you can use and hopefully start implementing in your life that week. And then also things from around the internet that we think you should be checking out in the B2B sales world. So jointhefollowup.com.
Awesome. And I really appreciate you taking the time to, share your insights, your thoughts, and a lot about your business. This is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Justin. This was great.
Cool. Well, for those that are listening or watching, I appreciate you being part of the TAGLine podcast. Until next time.